Okay, it says we're live. So welcome, people. This is going to be a really fun episode for you all. Um, I've got Mike on the line with us, and Mike has quite the extensive background that I think will help a lot of you that are looking for information around the programming, web development type subjects, and answer a lot of questions that I get from you all as far as this particular area of IT, which is not my expertise, although I understand it. So Mike has been around IT since 1994, so he's got a pretty nice resume. And I'm actually going to let him tell you a little bit about himself, and then we'll just jump right into the questions that I have for him. So, Mike, just maybe 2 minutes.
Okay.
And however you want to break it down, let them know a little bit about who you are and what you've done, what you've accomplished.
Okay. Well, first off, thanks for having me on. I started programming actually about age 12 on a Commodore 64. But from then, I really didn't get into the computer industry until 1994, as you said, where I got hired as a game tester, which at age 20, that's a dream job, of course, now being paid to play games, which you've been doing for free for many years, if you're me. And then from there, after doing that for about 5 years, I kind of had gone as far as I could as a tester. I mean, there's only so much you can do with that. And then I got into web development. And web development in the 90s was a very good place to be. It was almost like the roaring 90s, you could say. You could get high-paying jobs with really minimal amount of experience. And a lot of people got into the industry at that point. From there, went into basically just hardcore business apps, data-driven applications, both web and Windows, with some other stuff along the way. One of the coolest jobs I had, for example, was programming the interface to a medical robot. This medical robot was cutting edge technology, had lasers in it and all kinds of cool stuff. So yeah, that was probably the coolest job I've ever had. It was a 1-year contract. I really wish they would have hired me full time. I'd probably work there forever. But from there, I went back to sort of my traditional, role as being a web developer. And what I do basically, I could call myself a one-stop shop, meaning that I can develop the database, the business layer, the web application, or Windows application, if that's the case, and every aspect of that. So if I do the database, I can do this, what they call store procedures, triggers, views, the architecture, all the coding, and then lay out the GUI, prototyping, all that good stuff. Chiefly, I work in Microsoft products, which is Microsoft.net. I do C# and Visual Basic. Have done a little bit of C++. There's a lot of related technologies to that, of course. Like if you're on the web, of course, you're going to do HTML, JavaScript. The modern age, a lot of web development has moved towards more defined patterns like MVC, which is called Model View Controller. So you might do something called Angular, which is a JavaScript framework to do the front end, but your business layer might still be in C# or something else. And the back end could be SQL or Oracle. So I think that kind of gives you a little bit of a snapshot of where I've been, and open for questions.
Okay, that's a wealth of information right there already.
I hope I'm not. It's not overkill, but it's hard to compress 25 years in just a few minutes.
I hear you. All right, so let's kind of break it down just a little bit.
Sure.
There's a lot of different terms in IT that are kind of the same, depending on who you talk to. So, for example, you'll hear, programmer and developer.
Right.
What's the difference between those two words there?
Okay, you have to be careful because these words sometimes are used interchangeably, and then there's another term in there too that gets in the mix: engineer. So you'll hear software engineer, programmer, and developer. And you have to be careful because sometimes when you look at a job offering, it's written by an HR person who really is not technical at all. So they might have just thrown any kind of word in there. So you have to be careful. It's a syntax sort of thing. But generally, and like I said, generally, developer is a word that tends to be used with a web developer. And it is somebody like me who might do more than just programming. They might do database, things of that nature. Programmer, it tends to be more of someone who is just fixated on one language. Maybe they're an embedded software programmer and they use C and C++ all the time. Engineer is also kind of in that same area. I have noticed whenever they use the word engineer, they tend to want a degree more than the other other roles. But again, it really depends who wrote the requirements and where you are. There was one other example that came to mind when you said that. Architect is another word that gets thrown around, but what does it mean? I've seen two types of architects in my career. I have seen one who is a lead programmer of lead programmers. So it's sort of like he's the next guy up in the pyramid, right? And he is what I call a managing architect. So he's doing performance reviews. He's doing, some code review, and he's still making technology decisions. But then I've seen a pure technology architect that has nothing to do with the management functions. They're laying out the course of what technology are we going to use? How are we going to do it? Maybe even the hardware, like how are the servers going to be arranged? So again, it's a matter of syntax. So I know that's probably not the greatest answer, but it kind of does. It depends on where you are and who wrote the requirement.
That was perfect, Mike, because I've actually talked about this in several videos.
Okay.
Because it's very aggravating for somebody that's already in the field, and then people that are looking to get in. They're looking at these job requirements, these job posts, and they see this fancy name with all these, this list of stuff that you need to know. And it's,
sure.
and I know, because I've been in it, that half of that's just baloney,
Right.
And people are having a hard time distinguishing what is an engineer, what's a programmer, what's a developer. So I've tried to explain this, kind of, make it simplified so that people really understand that, hey, like you said, a lot of it's interchangeable. So you just have to really look at, okay, what is what are you doing on the job, really?
Right.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, one thing I wanted to mention about that, because I do have this sort of a long view of things. It can be frustrating, and that's a real thing, because when we go and you look at a job requirement, there's usually like a whole list of technologies they want, and you look at it and you think, man, there's nobody could know all this stuff. Nobody. When I first started programming, like all programming could have been on like one bookshelf. You'd have a book of C++, and a book of, maybe the Win API, and you know what I mean? It was very smaller, but there's been an explosion of technology over the years, and it almost feels like sometimes everyone wants to come out with their own language, their own technology, their own framework, and it just goes on and on and on, and it gets crazy. We've gotten to a point where when someone writes a job requirement, this is just a wish list. They wish that somebody would show up and know all this stuff, but nobody really could. Usually what they want in the main is the first few things. If it's a .NET shop, of course you're going to have to know .NET. If they're using SQL in the backend, of course you're going to need to know SQL. Maybe one or two other things, and everything else is just gravy. Like if we could find someone to check off all these boxes, we'd be great. But it's usually not going to happen, and there's just so much crazy stuff out there. You just can't cover it all. Another thing that comes into play is when they say they want a degree. Do they want a degree or don't they want a degree? It's not always clear cut. If you have, as much experience as I do, usually you don't need a degree. And in fact, I don't have a degree. I'm actually a really high-end hacker, you could say. I got in the 90s where really the degree was like, we don't care. Have you seen a computer? Have you done some ASP? Here's a job paying $60,000 a year, So,
yeah.
But I will say that is not true anymore. The roaring 90s is over. They do want degrees. This is really the way you get into the field. And in fact, I would say that the best way into the field, no matter what kind of programming it is you really need to go to school, work on your degree, and get into a co-op. Most companies today, I'm noticing, they want to recruit their junior programmers from co-ops and internships. So I think that's probably the best way in at this point. I don't think you're going to do like me and call someone up and say, well, I put together a few web pages and I've done a little ASP, give me a job. I don't see that happening anymore. So
you segued right into the next two questions I had. That was really good.
Thank you.
Can you explain what a co-op is? Because I don't even really know what a co-op is. I know what, internships are, but I'm unfamiliar with co-ops.
Sure. Well, a co-op is just that. It's in fact, if you go to a college now and you're taking a STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics curriculum, so computer science, computer engineering, something like that, you're actually required in some colleges to have a co-op. And a co-op and an internship is really kind of the same thing. But in a co-op, you get credits for it. And so if you go to like your college right now, they have 6 co-op credits that you have to take if you're in the engineering curriculum. So, you're required to take a summer and go work for someone, and they will pay you. And sometimes the pay is quite good. I mean, at BD, well, I dropped a company acronym, but at the company with the medical robots, they paid their co-ops pretty well. I think it was somewhere in the range of about $20 an hour. That's not bad pay if you're still in college.
Yeah.
And while you're there and you're working, they're actually evaluating you too in the background. And if they like what they see, they will call you back. And I have a perfect example of a gentleman who worked there. He was a computer engineer. That's a fusion of comp sci and electrical engineering. This is really what you need if you want to do something like robotics, because it's essentially programming hardware. They hired him straight out of college at it was just about $80,000 a year. I really couldn't even imagine making that much money at that age, still living at home, doesn't even have any rent. I would probably buy something totally impractical like a Dodge Viper or something like that if that was me. but that is really how they're doing it now. So when you get into college, you want to look at opportunities for internships and co-ops, and it's very important. So I would say that is the way to get in at this stage of the game. And there's one other thing I wanted to mention about degrees. There are a few companies out there, they don't care how much experience you have. You have to have a degree. Defense contractors or work for the federal government, I would guess that they have some requirement or rule in the books where they have to have a degree, and there's no way in unless you have it. So that is something to keep in mind. And it does come into play when you start thinking about being a lead programmer or something, or team lead as they call it. So there's definitely value in it.
Yeah, I think you and I just got lucky because we started in the 90s. So it was a little different for us back then, because like you, I don't have a degree either. I went through a tech school that was a 15-month program, and that was it.
Right.
So yeah, and that's a huge question that I get is, what degree do I get?
Sure.
Do I need a degree? And the conversation is just all over the place. It's like, okay, do I or do I not?
Right.
Now, what about like self-study for someone that's looking to get into programming or development? What can they do on their own to get some experience, if you will, and just study books or online courses, things like that?
Right. The only problem with self-study is there's so many technology and all, you can get kind of bogged down on what do you want to do. Do you want to work on Android? Do you want to work on PC? Do tablet development, mobile? It goes on and on, database. So the first thing you have to do is have a clear idea of what it is you want to do. And then from there, pursuing it, there's tons of online courses. I'm not being paid to say this, but I will say that one good place to go that I know of is it's a company called Pluralsight. They have classes on everything. And the reason I'm singling them out is if you go online and say there's a technology you want to learn, maybe C++. So there's plenty of sites and articles about C++. But is it C++ in the real? I mean, are you really going to be writing programs that say calculate the area of a triangle? No, you're not. In the real world, you're always going to be talking to a database or something like that. That's real programming. Pluralsight will show you, like if you want to learn Angular, it'll show you how to bring it all together. You're doing Angular to talk to a backend that gets to a database that, pulls some data back, and then you format it and things of that nature. That's more real world programming. So they have a good, what I would call class structure. And that's really my only dig against, classic college learning. They do tend to make you do these academic exercises that don't have a lot of application in the real world. I'll give you a good example. in analyzing algorithms. They do this thing called big O notation, and just analyzing like how efficient the algorithm is. I have to tell you, I have never had to do that in real life. I've never had to implement my own algorithm. They have libraries that do this for you. The main thing is knowing which one to choose, the best one to choose, and where to find it. So that's sort of like a little bit of a sinkhole when you're in college. You know, it's like nice to do, but you're really not going to do that on a daily basis. Same thing with like calculus. That's usually required in the comp sci curriculum. I've never had to sit down and do a derivative as a programming, you know, or an integration or anything like that. So, but learning on your own, you know, there's a million books. You know, Amazon really cuts the price with the electronic books that you can buy. There's always websites. There's always groups. If you want to get into game programming, that's a little bit of a specialty. You might want to build what they call a portfolio of like small games you've written on your own. And of course, in that world, you would want to learn an engine like Unreal or something like that, because a lot of their games are built off engines now. There's just not unless you're doing something small like a tablet or something like that, you're going to probably use a commercial product. So it really depends on where you want to go. And like I said, you're going to have to learn a database too. The sad fact is if you sit there and think about like, why is a computer in a business for most businesses? If it's a car dealership or a financial firm or an insurance company, the computers are there to manage data. That's what they do. And as a programmer, that is going to be a lot of your work. There are outliers. You could be working in a research and development lab. You could be working at the Hadron Collider, physics experiments. But the bulk of programming is managing data and writing what are known as database skins. And a skin can be a website or a report or an email. And I've whipped up Excel spreadsheets and then mailed them to accountants. But ultimately that is interacting with a database. So if you're in that field, that's something to learn too. And all the major outlets, like if it's Microsoft or Sun, they have free versions of their development tools. Like I haven't been to Microsoft in a little while to download something, but they used to have 2005 Express and SQL Express, all free. And you can download those tools and start using them. That's going to be vital because modern programming, there's a good bit of it is knowing your tool set, whether it's Visual Studio or Eclipse or whatever it is, you have to know your tools well. And these tools are quite complex. If you use I don't want to segue too much. I probably overkilled your question already, but something I want to mention about Visual Studio is it's almost a project management tool at this point. You can do unit tests. It interfaces to their online, so you can do agile programming with their templates where people are being assigned tasks, and all this runs through Visual Studio. So you want to know something about that. If you're a junior programmer, you're not expected to be a wizard or something like that. But you can get tripped up in some really weird ways. Like you find out, I have no Visual Studio, but it turns out they're using Git repository instead of the TFS that Visual Studio wants to use. And Visual Studio right now is a little bit flaky when it comes to Git. Weird things can happen. So you can kind of step into a bear trap. So, but having at least some sense of these things will really impress someone who's interviewing you.
Yeah, definitely. That was all really good stuff. And anyone watching this is really going to want to take notes because, you're giving some gems right here for someone that really wants to get into it.
Oh, thank you.
Let's just talk about gaming. I've had a couple people ask me about getting into the gaming programming part of it. Is that something? Obviously, gaming is still pretty huge. Going back to the degree, do you need a degree to get into the gaming part? How do you get into it? What are some of the areas that people can, inquire about in the gaming field?
So, yes, gaming is definitely the most interesting type of programming I know of outside of working on, something like a medical robot with lasers in it. And again, it comes down to taste. But a lot of young guys do get into computers because of games. And then they look at the computer industry. So I'm going to be frank with you when it comes to this. Working in the computer game industry is a lot of fun. There's no dress code. You're building toys more or less, and it can be great. However, nothing in life is all pluses. And the downside to this is you're not going to be paid like a professional. In fact, you could take whatever you're thinking that your typical C++ programmer makes in the dev world, the business dev world, and just slash it in half, because that's, yeah, it's the pay is not good. The hours are long. And it can be a little sinister. Like if you ever look at a successful game company and they show you their offices, it looks kind of like this fantasy land where they have arcade machines and pool tables, and someone comes in on Fridays to massage your back and so forth and so on. Well, there's a reason for all that. They don't want you to leave. They want you to be there all the time, maybe even during the weekends. So, they want to make you as comfortable as possible so you won't think about home that much. There's a certain sleaziness to the business too. Also, people are very territorial about their jobs in that industry, because if you think about a game designer, what would he do if he lost his job? He has no other skills. So he's very protective about his job, so that's like the good side and the bad side to it. The gaming industry isn't going anywhere, though. It's bigger than the movie industry right now in terms of like raw dollars that they make per year. So it's a very big industry. If you still want to get in after my warnings, I mean, if I was paid halfway decently, I'd be working in games. There's no question. Like I said, it's a lot of fun. And you get that sense of achievement when the game is done and it goes out and you see your name on the credits, The first game I work on, I still remember exactly when my name appears in the credits. It was a game called yeah, it was awesome. A game called Colonization, and the Windows version of Colonization. And there's a ship that sails to a shore, and my name appears when it's 3 inches from the shore. I still remember this. So that's the good side. Now, to answer your question, I've kind of beat around the bush. To get into the gaming industry, there's really 2 things you want to do. You do want to go to school for C++, because so many people want to get into the gaming industry. There's sort of a hazing that goes on, and actually the interviews are some of the most difficult that you'll ever sit through. Now, will you need to know how to optimize your CPU cache fetching? Probably not, because you're going to be working on Unreal or something like that if you're one of the major developers. But they'll ask you this and to weed you out, and that's an actual question I was asked during the game programming interview, along with a whole bunch of other ones it was literally the hardest interview I'd ever taken by far. But that's because they're trying to weed out people, because everybody wants to be a game developer. So to get in, you want to, like I said, you want to go do your comp sci, learn C++ pretty well, but you really want to learn one of the engines like Unity or Unreal. Those are the 2 big ones right now. And you want to put together a little portfolio. You want to do a few small games. Don't be over ambitious where you're going to try and do the next MMO. That's crazy. You'll never succeed. But they will be impressed if you can put together a little like Galaga clone, or maybe Tetris is almost like the textbook example. It's almost cliche at this point to program your own version of Tetris. But you put together like a little retro game, like a Robotron 2048 or something like that. A little AI, so a little bit of input. Just sort of cover the full gamut from start to finish and complete that. Don't make it half baked. So you can show that off, like, this is what I've done and this is what I can do for you. And actually, I said there was 2 things, but there's one third thing you need to do. You almost need to know somebody, and that's the hardest part. They do like to hire people they already know, and it's hard to get that relationship established. Your foot in the door is always going to be a tester. That's almost universal. Like the first job you have in the game industry is going to be testing games. But when you get in, just let people know, like, I'm taking programming, I'm taking art, I'm taking music production. So, make it clear to you that you have a career. And I'm going to give your viewers one secret, one thing that you should never, ever say if you're sitting there and getting that game development interview, because if you say this, you'll most likely not get the job. They'll ask, what do you want to do here? And if you say game design, you're going to be done, because yeah. Because you know what they hear when you say game design? They hear you say, I want to do the fun stuff and everyone else do the hard work. Because everybody wants to do game design. That's the dream, right? Yeah. Make my game. If you say this, they're going to be, oh, he's another poser. Trust me on this.
Wow.
Yeah, it's deadly. If you really, and now, so you have to almost prevaricate a little bit. Say, I want to be a programmer designer. Well, that's somebody who wants to do some of the hard work and some of the fun work. Okay, now you got something. And of course, if you really are interested in music or art, you'll be fine, you know. But just don't say I'm here to do game design. That's what all the posers say, and it's not going to look good for you.
Yeah, you got to be a little bit. You got to be a little bit more, unique, and
Yeah.
come up with something different.
Right.
It's
Right.
not all about just boom going straight for the kill there.
Right. Exactly. You got to work your way to the kill.
That's right. Yeah, that's a lot of people just want to. What they don't understand is that it's a climb,
Yeah.
and you can't just go from college to hero. It's just not going to happen. You got to work your way up, and so yeah, you just again proved my point. So
Right.
that's
and honestly, and I've been in the field. I still cannot tell you who ultimately greenlights a game design, like who actually says this is the game we're going to do next. And if you think about how powerful of a statement that is, because when a company commits to a game, they're committing, tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars to a project. That is a big decision. That is a lot of power for, they say, we're going to do this game next. So who actually does it? I'm not exactly sure. I think that the head of the creative development probably proposes the game, and then he has to pitch it to executives like you do in the movie industry or anything like that. But I mean, there's a long way from tester to head of creative development if you think about it.
Absolutely, man. Definitely. Well, there you guys, you heard it. Straight from the horse's mouth, how to get into gaming and all the details about it. So take that information and do what you will. That was really good, Mike. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Just for those that are still kind of looking to get into programming and web development, and all that, what are some of the common languages that are out there right now that they should kind of focus on as they're making their way in? Obviously, if they're going through college, courses, they're going to be taking some stuff, but things that they should actually focus on that your college curriculum is really not going to give you,
right,
that they can do on the side.
Sure. And that's a good question, because in college, they have diversified in recent years. In the old days, they would always want to teach you C++. And, I'm not like an advocate for any one language. I don't have a favorite. I don't look down on any other language or anything like that. I think they're all tools in the box, and they have things that they do better than others. Does that mean you can't interchange them a little bit in a way that's inoptimal? Well, sure. I mean, just like you can use a screwdriver as a chisel. Might work, maybe not.
Take a little longer.
Yeah, exactly. So the C++ and C in the modern world, in my opinion, they tend to be hardware programming languages, especially C. So if you're thinking about doing like automation, robotics, things like that, you definitely want strong C, C++, maybe even some assembler actually. But those are the main two. And actually, as just to link this to the game development, one of the reasons that C++ is still dominant in that field is you are programming hardware. If you're writing for a PlayStation or an Xbox or something like that, it's easy to make the code more portable if it's in C++ with a wrapper to interface to the specific hardware. So you can write the game in C++, but the video driver for the Xbox and the PlayStation are probably different, but there'll be an abstraction layer, to handle that. And web development, the big languages are .NET, which could either be C# or Visual Basic. I would recommend learning C# if someone was thinking about what to do, because Visual Basic is kind of, at this point, is very interchangeable with C#. And I've been to companies where they will interview me for C# and then assign me to Visual Basic, because if you can do one, you can probably do the other. And C# gives you a few features that is not in Visual Basic. I couldn't imagine a reason you would want to do it, but in C#, for example, you can do pointers, which is a C++ concept, and some other languages too. The fact that you have to start off with writing the word unsafe in your code to let the runtime know that you're going to do pointers should give you an idea of what Microsoft thought about doing pointers in C# as well. But that's the key word. Another language, of course, is Java. Java is very big. Is it bigger than .NET? I couldn't tell you that, honestly. It's outside my knowledge. Those are kind of the core languages. to do the front end, there's a lot of ways you could do it. You could go straight HTML. You could do Angular. They have templates now like Bootstrap that makes making the GUI look better, and you can develop it faster. You have to kind of pick your tool set, because we're getting to a point where these languages, traditionally, if you had done a .NET project, it's going to be .NET from start to finish. Your GUI will be like ASP. The back end will be maybe a RESTful service. I know that's a lot of jargon I'm throwing out, but these are actually keywords that people can look up.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have a RESTful service in C# that talks to a database, which could either be SQL or Oracle, or something else. Again, theoretically, it could be DBase or something, exotic. So those are core languages, and then everything else tends to be a support to those cores, whether it's Java, straight JavaScript, or even the libraries I had just mentioned. Those are some of the things. And of course, there's also tools that you can use. In the old days, they had Dreamweaver and Cold Fusion. Stuff like that is still around, so you could actually take that tack. And there's new fields that have popped up sort of in the niches between, being a database programmer and a front end programmer. Like they have something now that didn't exist when I started. It was called user experience designer, and they do layout and tools like one of them's called Axure, AXURE, I think it is, or SURE. I'm not sure. It's not my bag. But that's literally their job, is to program the look and the feel, or not, I should say program, but lay out the look and the field and create like a template. That job didn't exist when I started. So there's a lot more specialization than there used to be. So these are some of the tools. And, one thing with web development in particular is it just keeps growing and growing almost exponentially. There's always something new coming down the pipe. So it really is hard for me to sit here and say, learn this for sure, because some of this stuff could be like here today, gone later today. And a good example of that is Angular 1. Angular 1 was frankly a bit of a mess. The syntax changed a lot over the course of its development, to the point where it was like, if you saw an example of something you wanted to do on the web and that example was over a year old, don't bother. It's probably not going to work, because they have changed the language since then. And then that went away. And now we have Angular 2 and Angular 4. And another good example was Microsoft Silverlight. Silverlight came out, and Microsoft told us this was going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And where's Silverlight now? It's gone. So it's been somewhat wrapped up into WPF. And so it's changing and evolving so dramatically. It's hard for me to say learn this periphery language. The core languages are the ones that are still kind of going, the C# and the Javas. So those are two I would point your users towards. And like I said, it does not hurt at all to learn some database. And if you want to keep it generic, you could just learn straight SQL, because both SQL and Oracle, it's confusing. There's MS SQL as a database, and there's SQL as a language. So if you learn the straight SQL language, you can pretty much talk to either both SQL or Oracle. They have a little bit of a different dialect. I like to think of it as American English versus UK English. But you can get them to talk, and your basic selects and all that kind of stuff will still work on either one. So these are some of the things I would look into.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the database stuff, because I have a whole video on what a database administrator does, and I'm getting a lot of questions on that as well. How do I get into that? What do I study?
Right.
And I know that Microsoft SQL and Oracle are probably the most common ones out there.
Sure.
And they both have their certifications for those. If someone were to go get the certifications, say the Microsoft certifications to be a DBA, do you think they'd have a chance of finding themselves, an entry-level position without going for some sort of degree? And say, that's really what they want to do. That they just want to go and they want to manage Microsoft environments and just kind of go down that path there. Would you say that just pursuing those certifications, now understanding that I believe there's 7 exams just to get that cert, and it's not easy, would you agree or disagree that perhaps they could get into that area to start messing around with SQL databases?
Right. Well, full disclosure, I'm not a DBA and I don't sell myself as one. So we're getting kind of like on the edge. I mean, I can fake it. I can make a whole database and so forth. And I have done it. I've done whole projects from start to finish, but I don't sell myself as a DBA. So that's my disclaimer. For SQL, I think it is of somewhat lesser value. I still think it's good to do. And if you're looking for an entry level position, it would definitely show that you know your stuff. And there are those jobs out there, but SQL honestly is a little bit easier to use, and you can fake it if you're a programmer. Oracle is more intensive. DBA as an Oracle is actually a solid job with good pay. It's harder, to be honest. It's a powerful database. They both are actually. Just a little bit of a side story. When back in the late 90s, there was a big advantage to using Oracle over SQL. Oracle was more expensive, but it really worked well. If you had a database that you were dealing with millions and millions of rows of data, you would go with Oracle. And SQL at that time, I think it was 6.5 when I first started, just run slowly, kind of, you could almost see smoke coming out of the servers. It was kind of, doing stuff. I worked on a project where they used a SQL database to handle the Department of Defense's ammunition expenditures. Imagine the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, like how much ammunition they use in their training exercises and all that. It was training ammo. And this thing ran poorly. It always ran poorly because there was just too much data in there. The main table, I think it had like 6 million rows of data. Now Microsoft has worked very hard to close that gap. And and the modern SQL is very powerful and fast. Yeah, and if you put the two in a head-to-head test, I'm not sure who would win anymore. Probably would depend on what you're doing. That's a bit of a segue, I know, but I could give you some background. I think the Oracle, certification is more powerful, if that's the right word to use, when it comes to trying to land a job as a DBA. They do spend time, doing performance tuning and things of that nature. SQL, like I said, you can still kind of fake it as a programmer. They do have SQL DBA jobs, so I'm not totally discouraging that path. But again, this is not necessarily my area of expertise, so that's just my opinion.
No, that's good information, though. I appreciate that. That I wasn't, I didn't want to go deep dive on that. Okay. But yeah, I mean, you definitely. You hinted a lot at SQL and just databases and stuff. So I just kind of want to pull that little bit of information out because that's a pretty common question I get too. Yeah. So just kind of wrapping it up, last question. How does someone get an entry level job? Even if they've got their, computer science degree, and maybe they did their co-op or internship, and neither one of them resulted in a job. Right. Do you have any tips on how to get your foot in the door? That's the biggest issue that we have in IT, frankly, is just getting our feet wet and getting in the door. Because you look at you look at the requirements from the employers, and as someone that's new, you look at that and you freak out. You're like, I don't know 99% of this. How is someone going to hire me? And employers are very unreasonable. They don't want to give you a chance. And so, anyways, that's kind of where my question is going.
Yeah. Well, everything you said is true, and sadly, like a lot of industries, and I'm kind of victim to this too. Actually, what I'll get to in a minute is, everybody wants experience. So how do you get that experience? And I actually have that problem too. I've been a contractor my entire career, just about. But being a contractor definitely means you're like a soldier, and you just fight fires and do things. So when I think about being a lead programmer, everyone always wants experience. So I'm kind of stuck in that regard too. It's kind of interesting, how many projects have you managed? I haven't managed any. I'm a contractor. I do stuff. So it is tough, and I definitely can understand the frustration and that whole list of requirements everyone wants. It is very daunting. My thinking on it is, if I were starting out today, I would actually look at maybe doing some contract work, because the contracting companies kind of run interference for you. They sell you to some extent.
Mhm.
Oh, we got this young guy, he's bright. They, you know, how honest they are maybe is questionable, but you know, they act like an agent, and they can get you into jobs, and you know, you can tell them exactly where you are in your career. Look, I'm just starting out. I don't have a lot of experience. You know, they might be one way to do it. One thing I would also suggest too is it may be a good idea to specialize in this point in some given thing. You may want to take like a certification in, say, being an embedded programmer. You know, that's hardware more or less. That's actually, in my opinion, and my opinion is worth what, you know, that and $2 will get you a cup of coffee. But my opinion is that we're going to a world that's heavy into automation. You know, these devices are everywhere now, the tablets, the VR headsets, you know, the list is endless, right? Manufacturing, you've got robots doing lots of jobs. I really think that there's probably a fairly bright career in doing like automation, which is embedded systems, computer engineering, things of that course, things in that area. You know, again, I go back to the example I gave earlier, where a guy got hired right out of college at, I believe it was $78,000 a year. He co-opted. That was it. He had, you know, no years of experience. That tells me that that's a fairly hot field, and they're looking for people. You know, so I would try to specialize. I think just coming out of college with a, you know, a regular sort of garden variety comp sci degree is okay. But I could see how you could get stuck. And I do have some like grim news, unfortunately, and there's no avoiding this. And then this could be linked to my geographic location on the Mid-Atlantic area, but wages have been stagnant for 15 years for developers. And the last 3 years, I've seen them actually go down in this area.
Wow.
Yeah, startling, right?
Yeah.
And very, very scary. You know, I hit six figures when I was 27. Okay. And that was contract work. So it was a little bit of a skewed number. Now I'm struggling to get back to six figures, and I've seen some job offers with some rates attached to them, both full-time and contract. They're really almost insulting. I mean, I had one that was $35 an hour, no benefits. Okay. Yeah, and the minimum they wanted was 10 years experience. That was non-negotiable. Had to have 10 or more years of experience. I have a friend who's an artist who wouldn't work for $35 an hour with no benefits. And it was a short contract too, which typically with a contract, the shorter it is, the more you get paid, because there's no job security. So if you're on a 2 or 3 month contract, you know, day one, you're looking for another job. So usually the rate is pumped up because you're taking a risk. So it's been a little scary in this area. And this is, you know, like I said, I am chiefly a web development person. So maybe it's just in that area, but we are under siege by, you know, cheap foreign labor, outsourcing. You know, I don't want to go into politics, but this is a real thing. There was a major company who I will not name. They did a major project for the state that I work for a lot. This project was $115 million to start, and ended up being over $300 million. When I say major company, I mean a major global company that everybody has heard of. If you walked into their building where they were developing this project, they're not an English name on any row of cubes. They were all people they had brought in on visas so they can underpay them to do the same work that I would typically do. So it is real. You know, I hate to say it, but it's true.
I've talked about it, Mike. I have a video on it too. And yeah, you're right. It is real. I see it where I work.
Yeah.
The building I'm in, you know, the entire top 2 floors are exactly what you just explained.
Sure.
You know,
I work for a major firm that developed industrial air conditioners, and they had a whole office in India that was called the Center of Excellence, which I'm sure had to be ironically named because they had the worst code that would come out of that office. We had a rule, an actual hard rule that said that no code from the Center of Excellence can go into the project unless it has been reviewed by 2 stateside programmers. But the company was still willing to do that because they were so cheap. And that's a shame. So programming can be outsourced, and I mean, I don't want to oversell being like, you know, computer engineer on hardware, but that is one of the points of it, is that there's a physicality to it. You have to work physically with the hardware and with whatever it is the company is building. You can't easily ship that overseas like you can with a pure web development project where you're just dealing with data. So there's a little bit of an advantage there. Can it still happen? Sure. But there's at least gives you, I think, a little bit better edge, so to speak. So, those are some things to look out for. And that's why I say, like, maybe specialization might be the way to go for a new guy. If you're going into web development, take that class in Angular 4, knock out something cool and flashy, like a nice graphic interface or something like that. And it doesn't have to be a game or something, but, maybe like the person clicks a button and it takes data and turns it into a real-time like pie chart or something like that in Angular, something that's going to impress somebody. So maybe the short answer to that is you might want, instead of just having your degree, you might want to have a little portfolio of some projects you have done that you can show off real quick. Show up in the interview with a laptop under your arm, have it set up, and please, I beg you, test it before you show it to somebody, because technology always fails when you show it to someone else. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I've had it happen. Something I thought worked perfectly, and it just blows up. As soon as we go to demo it. So just test it as good as you can. Real quick story. One time, real young, I had just started programming really seriously. I put together this demo, and we took it to in front of the clients, executives, guys in suits. And it was like you did A, B, and C on this website. And the business analyst is running the show, and immediately she goes, well, let's start with choice C on this list. And in my mind, I'm like, I never tested doing that. It's supposed to be sequential. And she clicked on it, and it blew up right on the big screen. I'm doing one of these numbers, So, like I said, that's a side story. Just really thoroughly test it. Make sure your hardware is ready to go, and do show up with that under your arm at the interview and say, look, I've got this thing I'd like to show you. I think it shows off what I can do. I think it could help, actually, And of course, it should be relevant to what they're interviewing you for. Don't show a game to somebody who wants you to do financial reports or something like that. That's not going to really work. But, I think that might help a little bit. But just showing up with your degree in hand, no, I don't. I think you're just going to be a face in the crowd. And there's a lot of faces in the crowd these days, because every year the colleges, they stamp out more programmers.
Yep. And I always try to, kind of going along with that, I always encourage people, while they're in school, they're going for that BA degree that takes 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just go to school. While you're there, start doing stuff on the side, like you just said.
Sure.
Start programming stuff on the side, learning things. You got to go outside of what you're doing, in school. This way, when you're done, when you get that degree, you've got that sample program or whatever it is, and don't wait. You got to start beforehand, and those 4 years are like, you've got to take advantage, basically, and don't just show up at class and then go home and party and whatever, and then 4 years later expect to find a job. That's just
right.
That's not the way it works. Not at all. If you want something to work when you get out of college, or I guess I should say, if you expect to find a career when you get out of college, you need to work your butt off while you're studying. And so, you just basically, you said it.
Yes, especially if it's a college where there's not a lot of good co-ops or internships. You really are going to have to put something together on your own to impress people. And, a young person, their most, their biggest advantage, their biggest commodity is time. They're not like me, where they have a wife and kids and all that who shred your personal time. They have a lot of time on their hands. So use that time wisely and put together something that's really going to try and wow somebody. And again, you want to be focused on what field you're interested in and what is going to work with your degree. I'm not trying to dog the colleges, but they do tend to teach you this sort of pure programming that may not have a heck of a lot of application, and depending on where you are. For example, your college, they have a class in operating systems. I've never ever had a program in operating system ever. It's interesting perhaps, but how practical is it? So, you have to be aware of things like that. So, I'm totally in agreement with you. You have to use your time very wisely.
Yep. That's exactly it. All right. That was like, I don't know, almost an hour, and that was some solid information for you people. I suggest that you watch this twice, maybe 3 times, take notes, and apply what Mike just said, because wow, that was a lot of stuff, Mike, and that was awesome. I really appreciate that, and people are gonna appreciate it as well. So those of you watching, give Mike some love in the comment section below. And yeah, that was awesome. Now, before we leave, I want Mike to talk about something. Mike is not only a programmer, web developer, and all that other good stuff, but he's also an author. And he has a book that's just recently released. And I want you guys to go check it out. It's something that I'm going to download. And Mike, go ahead and just tell us a little bit about it.
Sure.
And all that good stuff.
Yeah, so it is important. We work in a very technical field. It's good to have a creative outlet. Everyone should have one. I like to write. I've been reading my whole life, and started writing about 7 years ago. I'll be perfectly honest. Some of it was to fill time because I was a contractor for the government, and we had a lot of downtime. So it was a good way to fill it. And so I started writing. I do write in fantasy and sci-fi and gothic, I guess you could call it, for lack of a better term. So I've written, I'm working on my second book now. It's about 95% done. It's about ready to go for professional editing. That's called The Shadow Cabal. It's not quite there yet, but we're almost there. But my first book is called, oh, there we go. It might be backwards. It is on my end, but it's called Solar Call.
I can see it. Yep.
Yeah. Now you can see that it's got my pen name on it. We're deviating from programming a little bit, but it's good to have a pen name if you're an author, because if your books suck, then you can start over with another pen name. That's really one of the reasons to do it. Also, if you decide, I don't want to write fantasy, I want to write, classic literature, you might want to take another pen name because it doesn't really fit. I think we're about to have a visitor. My 4-year-old has found me. So that's the reason to use a pen name. But this is my first one. It's very much like a mythology type fantasy. It's just it's a great exercise. It's a lot of work. Anyone who tells you writing is otherwise is lying to you.
Yeah.
So if you all want to check it out, it's up on Amazon. I would appreciate the love. Helps pave the way for the next book and the next book. I'm not going to stop no matter what, but every bit helps, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Cool. So I'll definitely go download a copy of it. And those of you that are interested in that genre, let's help Mike out.
Yeah.
Grab a copy of it. Yeah, definitely.
And if you ever have any other questions for me, or if you think I'll be useful again, I'd certainly love to be back. Game development in the game industry, something I still follow. That could maybe be something of interest, maybe video in itself. I still have a lot of people I know it's in the industry working at like Blizzard and some of the other major companies for Axis, who puts out Civilization and XCOM, and so I'm kind of connected, even though I'm not really in the game anymore. I know a lot about the games.
That's right. Yeah, we all have these connections, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. I had the buddy who was at Blizzard. Just a quick story. He's known as the Babe Ruth in the industry because he started out as an unpaid intern, and he said he wasn't even at Blizzard. He said, one day I'm going to work at Blizzard. And he made it happen. It took him a long time to climb that ladder, but he got up there and he followed it, packed up his family, went to California, because like I said, I'm on the East Coast, and now he designs boss fights. So,
you just said something that's really important too. I've talked about internships that are unpaid, and
yes.
People really undervalue that.
Yes.
So that's something that, again, that's really, really important for you folks to understand, is that a lot of times in order for you to get where you want to go, ultimately, you've got to start at the very, very bottom. And that could mean an internship that is unpaid, $0, volunteer time. But in the end, it'll pay off. So I totally forgot about that, Mike. I'm so glad you just said that.
Yeah, when he did it, I had the opportunity to possibly apply for in the same company, and I was like, I can't do it because I had a house at that small house, but I had a house at that point and a mortgage. I can't do an unpaid internship. but it does show a company you're willing to really go that extra mile. I mean, they look favorably upon that, you know, and when it starts out, any job isn't all that glamorous. I still remember the very first programming task I was ever given, day one. You know, I thought I was going to write some code and help develop a product. No, I spent the day opening 100 different pages of I'm not pages, I'm sorry, 100 different files of code and changing one line of code in them, you know, because the previous programmer had made an error, and had to go and do a search and replace on 100 different files and just cut and paste this one line of code in. That was my first programming task. Not a lot of programming, as you can see, but you know, you got to start somewhere, right?
That's the perfect example. You know, a copy paste of like a line of code. You know, and it's not always going to be glamorous. I'm telling people, just don't understand that. You know, especially right. the younger folks. They just they think that they're going to just jump right into something, and you and I are here today to tell them. Actually, I've been saying it for a while, but now I've got you on my side. We're just hitting them with the truth. You know, it's just, this is the way it works. So
yeah, I don't want to make them like drop their comp sci degree or something like that. But again, you know, one of my only complaints, you know, about programming is that it is kind of packaged up like you're going to be developing these awesome products and amazing solutions, and sitting around like a scientist coming up with a great algorithm. Unfortunately, a lot of it really isn't like that. It's you know, it's managing data. It's just sort of grinding it out. It's work, you know. I mean, there are certainly jobs that are a little bit more exciting than that. And that's one more tip I'd like to give to your viewers. If you are interested in that kind of work, you know, really what you want to aim for, but you're going to have to climb the ladder to get to it, is you want to work in an R&D department in a firm, because the R&D department gets to play with the latest software. If it's hardware, the latest hardware, you know, that kind of thing. That's the place to be, is R&D. And they actually have like what I call playtime, where, you know, before a project or in between projects, they get to play around with new technologies, just kind of get ideas of how they want to do the next project. You know, if, you know, that's the place to be, in my opinion. But if you're okay with being in a financial firm and grinding out, you know, reports, you know, it pays well. It's not glamorous work, but it will put money in your pocket, you know. So the R&D work can be profitable too. Don't misunderstand. It's you know, it's like work. Some days you're just laying bricks, and some days it's more exciting, you know.
That's it. And R&D, by the way, guys, is research and development. That's what he's referring to. So yeah. And by the way, you know, it's what we're talking about here regarding the climb and the hard work is not just in this discipline that Mike has been focusing on. It's all areas of IT, you know. So that's it. You just got to work. Yeah, just got to work. It's a constant grind, like Mike said. Constant grind. Keep learning. Always willing to learn and change and grow and evolve. You know. Right.
And that goes back to my statement about the game programming. You know, if you want to make good money, you do the not fun stuff. You know, you do the reports and the data and all that good stuff. Do games? Well, it's a lot of fun, but there's a price to be paid. Nothing's all pluses, you know?
Yeah. Awesome. Mike, man, this has been incredible. Again, thank you so much. Who knows, may have you back for a second segment, because, you know, people might have some additional questions, but if they do, you know, they can always comment on the video, and, you know, if you feel inclined, you can just kind of chime in with some of the easier stuff. I don't expect you to spend a lot of time, you know, answering people's questions at all, but
sure. No, I'll definitely keep tabs and check in from time to time, and yeah, you know, if anyone's got anything, I'll see what I can add, you know.
Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. Again, thanks again, Mike. Everyone, show Mike your love with not only the information he's provided in IT. Go get his book as well. And
they got to get the plugs in, right? This is a fake book, by the way. I was out of print copy, so I had to slap a fake cover on another book. If you actually go the extra mile and get this printed, it's probably not going to look like this. But it was a last minute effort, I will admit.
Hey, you did the work though. That's what counts. So, and it's out there. You published it. So, all right, I'll hit stop broadcast here. Thanks again, Mike, and
sure.
We'll talk on the next one.